What did it truly mean to be a delicatus, the Roman term for a favored young male slave, chosen not for strength but for beauty, refinement, and controlled demeanor? To spectators in the forum or the elite circles of the Palatine Hill, these boys were not seen as human beings. They were property, objects of status, valued no differently than fine furniture, rare animals, or imported luxuries meant to signal wealth and taste. 4 deeper stories history never wanted told. Subscribe. Public slave auctions took place in prominent locations such as the Forum Boarium, near the banks of the Tiber River. Enslaved individuals were displayed on raised platforms, their bodies examined while placards listed their origins, skills, and physical condition. Young boys, commonly Greek, Thracian, Syrian, or Phrygian, were especially prized for their perceived elegance and youth. Their price rose or fell based on appearance, posture, and imagined potential. Some were seized during military campaigns. Others were sold by desperate families in the provinces, sacrificing their children to survive. The Roman satirist Juvenal, writing in the 1st century CE, bitterly observed that a curly-haired boy costs more than a farm, exposing not only elite excess, but a society where human lives were openly traded alongside cattle and grain. Once purchased, the boy's existence narrowed into constant supervision, discipline, and conditioning. Those assigned to elite households were trained relentlessly. Their days were filled with grooming, serving, entertaining, or simply standing in silence to enhance the household's image. In the private chambers of Rome's ruling class, where senators conspired and poets performed, these boys lived surrounded by luxury, yet confined by rigid control. Comfort did not equal freedom. The Roman Empire did not merely allow this system, it formalized it. The trade of enslaved boys for domestic and courtly service was neither hidden nor unusual. It functioned as a visible component of the elite luxury economy, accepted and normalized by law and custom. Yet this was only the beginning. For those deemed especially valuable, proximity to power brought deeper control. Within the emperor's household, ownership alone was insufficient. Authority demanded something more absolute. Castration as control, the imperial court's secret practice. For Rome's elite, power extended beyond conquest and legislation. It reached into the bodies of the enslaved. This was most evident in the use of eunuchs within the imperial court. Enslaved boys and young men whose altered bodies symbolized submission, hierarchy, and exclusivity. Inside the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill, eunuchs known as spadoni served emperors and nobles alike. These practices were not anomalies but reflected Rome's uneasy adoption of Eastern customs. Although Roman writers mocked eunuchs as symbols of Eastern decadence, elite households continued to employ them, particularly those originating from Parthia and Asia Minor. The contradiction was unmistakable. Historical evidence suggests that castration, though technically prohibited under the Lex Cornelia, was sometimes carried out to preserve physical traits favored by the elite. Roman medical texts avoid explicit detail, but silence itself speaks volumes. The contradiction in Roman law is striking. Castration was forbidden in theory, yet enforcement weakened whenever elite interests were involved. Although castration was officially prohibited, enforcement remained uneven, especially when powerful households were involved. As Rome's borders stretched farther outward, this legal contradiction only deepened. Enslaved boys from regions such as Cappadocia, while seldom acknowledged openly, became a deliberate instrument in preserving elite dominance. Their bodies were reshaped not for survival, but for status, control, and permanence within imperial hierarchies. For many of these enslaved individuals, existence inside the emperor's private domain was defined by routine, restriction, and invisibility. Their service followed strict ritual, yet their presence was rarely recognized beyond their function. The emperor's slaves hidden lives inside Rome's imperial court. Deprived of freedom, family ties, and personal identity, countless enslaved boys in ancient Rome were absorbed into the private worlds of the imperial elite, often disappearing from public record altogether, leaving no trace of who they once were. One of the most infamous cases was Sporus, an enslaved youth drawn into the inner circle of Emperor Nero. According to Suetonius in the 12 Caesars, Nero ordered Sporus to undergo physical alteration, dressed him in women's clothing, and staged a public ceremony in which he referred to him as his wife. Sporus appeared beside Nero in public, accompanied him at official events, and lived within the imperial residence. The emperor reportedly renamed him Sabina, invoking the memory of his deceased wife. Historians generally view this episode not as intimacy, but as a display of unchecked authority, spectacle, and imperial excess. Yet Sporus was not an exception. Roman texts reference others, Delicati, Spidones, and Pueri Delicati, enslaved youths chosen for their appearance and assigned highly controlled roles. These figures appear only briefly in historical sources, sometimes criticized, sometimes strangely admired, but rarely examined as individuals. Behind the surface luxury, life at court was harsh and dangerous. It was a world shaped by suspicion and political maneuvering. Suetonius records that during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, the villa on Capri became associated with disturbing rumors. Though such accounts may reflect political bias, their repetition across multiple sources points toward genuine anxieties about unchecked power and abuse. What made these lives particularly tragic was the contradiction of constant visibility and absolute silence. These enslaved youths were displayed as markers of wealth and refinement, yet possessed no autonomy. They lived among marble columns and slept on gilded couches, while remaining tightly controlled. Roman society, obsessed with rank and appearance, did not regard this condition as immoral, but as evidence of elite privilege. To exist as such a slave in the Roman Empire was to stand close to authority while remaining entirely powerless. Admired, utilized, and displayed, yet never free, their lives became performances crafted to uphold a system where elegance and domination were inseparable. Rome's trade in enslaved boys exposed an empire in which refinement masked exploitation, and political power was enforced through ownership of human bodies. Practices of physical alteration and public display remind us that even the most advanced civilizations can conceal brutality beneath art, law, and ceremony. How might the silenced experiences of these eunuchs reshape your understanding of Roman greatness? Comment below. As Juvenal once asked, "Cus custodiet ipsos custodes?" Who will guard the guards themselves?